My name is Dave. I've been at Baremetrics for about 6 months now, and I'm going to just help Brian kind of sort through questions. So if you have questions, drop that into the Q&A. We'll be going through those on the back end, and we will interrupt Brian and get those questions answered. With that, I will flip it over to Brian and bid you adieu.
Thanks, Dave. We got a bunch of great questions. And so what we try to do here is to answer some generalized questions. So those things are usually around like timeline and like kind of like, who are you? What type of company are you? So we'll sort of address those categorically. Then we'll get into the specifically worded questions that we want to dive into. And then if you have any questions at all, we're not going to shy away from anything. So please ask, and we'll answer everything that we get through here. So as far as timeline, so I'm just going to give a quick overview of like where Baremetrics been from the acquisition to today, just to contextualize a lot of the key events, and that hopefully will answer a lot of questions or maybe bring more questions up. So this is where we bought Baremetrics. This is November of 2020, and things are kind of like, okay, we're in a declining to flat MRR situation. We're in a declining cash situation, and we're also missing some pretty key parts of the business. So for example, we don't have any concept of like account management. There's nothing that we're doing proactively to outreach to customers, to help solve problems, or even to build a relationship to understand what we could be doing more of in the future. We also don't have things like a cohesive product strategy at this point. We have a bunch of product-related activities going on, but there's no real through line of understanding what do our customers need from us, and then what's our way of actually delivering on those key areas. So moving forward to H1 of 2021, and things are looking pretty good. So we're doing a lot of work here around fixing tech debt. We are rewriting some of the most important parts of our code base. We are running a bunch of experiments, and some of them seem to be working, and we're seeing results here, which is really great. But this is looking in retrospect. So I also look at this time period of like, oh, this is where we're starting to really lose our focus. We're spinning a bunch of different plates. We're moving in 1,000 different directions, which, as you can see here, does give you some immediate results. But that's kind of setting us up for some pain later on. So over this time period, we're growing, but we also burn $320,000 in cash. So growing, but burning cash. And so then we moved into H2, and it's like, so this is where plates are kind of hitting the floor. We're doing so many different things. This is where we are having experiments that we've run come back unsuccessful. We're still going through the process of fixing tech debt. So one of the major things that we did over this period of time is that we moved our entire server infrastructure. And so we're kind of getting into a spot where we spread ourselves really thin, and now we're starting to see some of the results of being spread so thin. So kind of in summary, for this time period, we're both shrinking, and we also burned an additional $700,000 in cash. So shrinking and burning cash, that's a brutal spot to be in. However, on the flip side, this is where we're really getting a clear picture of what our customers are looking for, where we've done a bunch of customer calls, and during this phase, we're talking to tons and tons of customers. We're getting an idea of like who we want to be in the future, where we need to go, and using that kind of updated vision, we actually did an acquisition during this time. So while things look grim from an MRR perspective of not moving up, this is where a lot of clarity has been achieved for us. And this is what we've sort of been able to use to guide, this for me was really like the starting point of where getting onto our current trajectory, where we needed to go through. And then we get kind of to this year, 2022. And when I talk about this internally, I kind of call this like the beginning of phase 2, kind of end of phase 1. And for me, when I talk about phase 1 internally, that's like we've gotten through a lot of the tech debt. We've gotten through a lot of the fires, and we've answered a lot of the key questions that we didn't know about the business of like, well, who are we? Where do we need to go? What does the market need? What resources do we have available to us? That's always been a shocking thing for us, is that a lot of our customers don't know about all of the features of Baremetrics. And sometimes we don't. I was surprised not too long ago by finding a sub view of a specific metric that was really useful to me in the moment. So during this time frame, we've really truly understood. We fixed a lot of the underlying issues with the business. We've fixed a lot of tech debt, and we're moving into the future with a pretty clear path of where we need to go. So we have the cash to invest now. We have an idea of where we want to be, and we are continuing to even increase in how we're talking to customers and making sure that we're doing things like this. One of the big goals for the end of this year was like, we need to get back to talking to customers. We need to get back to having more regular communications and sharing the things that we're doing and as we go instead of in retrospect. So that's a quick timeline. If there's any specific questions around what happened at any specific point in time, please ask. I'm happy to elaborate everywhere. So the other kind of questions, or like kind of class of questions that we've got, are like, well, who are you? What type of company are you? What we wanted to do here is talk a little bit about our brand principles. We've never shared these publicly before, but we wanted to get some of these out here as a way to both communicate how we measure ourselves internally, and also to provide a level of accountability, because we want to make sure that we are living up to these. So the first one is customers come first. This is sort of a way for us to really distinctly clarify like how we're prioritizing our time and our effort, even from the macro perspective of like, as we're planning out roadmap and things like that, but also on a micro perspective. So an example of a way that we might violate this principle is if we reach out to a customer and they have some data that needs to get like combined, or there kind of needs to be some cleanup work on their data. And we go to the customer and say like, yeah, like we just need you to like do all this extra work so that your Baremetrics account delivers on its promise. Well, that's kind of an example where we're prioritizing ourselves, or prioritizing our own time instead of making sure that the customer is coming first. So that's something that this is the first one that we put in the list. This is also one of the first ones we think about internally. Second one is insight and not data driven. So this is something where we're really focused on making sure that we're not just delivering more information into businesses. I ran a business through acquisition, and I remember one of the most frustrating things to me was that it wasn't really a function of not having information at my fingertips. It was not knowing what to do, or not being able to analyze that data or make it useful to me. So this is something that we think about constantly, of like, how can we deliver insights, both in the product, obviously, like what are more valuable subsets of data that we can provide? How can we do automatic analysis on information to show you what opportunities exist? That also comes from the team that we have, making sure that we're hiring experts, making sure that if there's something that we can't make a computer do for you, there's a human at Baremetrics that will help you get an insight out of that. And next, simple, transparent, and clear. Hopefully that's relatively straightforward based off of what we're doing now, but this is really from the perspective of in the past, we just haven't communicated that clearly and transparently. And we think that's something that Baremetrics historically has done very well. And frankly, I feel like I've dropped the ball on that. So this is something for us to put at the forefront and say like, yeah, we want to continue to communicate, and we want to be transparent and clear when we're putting things out in the world, and not trying to overcomplicate or make ourselves look cool by putting something out there. We want to make sure that, again, because it needs to be customer focused, needs to be useful to you, the person that's on this call, and it needs to be insightful. We need to do that in a clear and transparent way. Okay, so let's get to some specifically worded questions that we got. First question, if you had to do it over again, what would you do differently with the price increase? Was it worth it? So yes, it was worth it, and I would certainly do a number of things differently. So I would give customers if we had to do it again, and if I was able to like create the perfect environment, I definitely would give more notice to customers. A lot of customers kind of felt rushed or were caught off guard. And in addition to that, I wish that we we were in more regular conversations with our customers, that we could have brought this up and we could have talked to them about it ahead of time. Everybody basically found out at the same time, and everybody found out. I think we gave something like 30 or 45 days notice or something like that. And that's just, in retrospect, that's just really not enough time to digest a change in pricing like this. So I would have given more time. The second thing is that we had a lot of people that were reaching out, and we communicated poorly from the perspective that they felt like they had to call us to get information. And maybe that's kind of some fallout from call to cancel. And like Baremetrics is a company you have to call to do anything, that like kind of unfortunate a trend that we created there. So people felt like they had to call us to get anything pricing related. And that wasn't the case, but kind of the idea was that I wanted to put myself out there so that if anybody had any negative feedback, that they could deliver it directly to me. And I had hundreds of calls, but some people felt like, and I understand where they're coming from, and I think we could have done a better job of making it clear that you didn't need to like call us and ask us what was going to happen. We should have been much more clear up front that that was an added option for anybody who would like to discuss or yell at me about this change. We wanted to make that an option for everybody. And then I guess the last thing is that we got a lot of feedback that the email was just way too long, and I appreciate that. I think that goes against the principle that I just mentioned about being transparent and simple and clear. So it's hard for me to say anything else other than, yeah, like we dropped the ball on that. We're not living up to our own brand principle. And I heard that a whole bunch, that the email was too long. So I would certainly change that in the future. And just to kind of maybe speak about the price increase for another moment, there's obviously lots of downside, the downside of creating friction and frustration for our customers. One of the other things that I learned is that it's very stressful on your team as well. It's a team effort to go through a price increase. So we had to deal with that, and it's really like quite distracting for the entire company when you're going through a price increase. So I was expecting it to be like, oh, we're generating this frustration for our customers. We need to make sure that that's worth it. But I wasn't really anticipating the amount of internal stress and internal distraction that was going to be created for everybody. So that was kind of a lesson learned. One of the things I was shocked about specifically during the price increase was so I expected the conversations to go very poorly. And that was kind of the way that I went in. Every time I went into one of those calls, I was expecting to kind of get beat up for 30 minutes or an hour. And almost universally, the calls went better than I expected. Obviously, people were frustrated, but it was really, I found it to be extremely useful to hear from customers like, well, you're getting the real feedback. We try to ask our customers all the time to get feedback, but when you're talking to customers from the perspective of a price increase, they're really thinking like very front and center of their mind, like, well, the price is going up. Like, does this get enough? Are we getting enough value out of this product? Is this delivering the value that we need? And that gives them a chance to say like, here's what's valuable to us. So I get to hear directly from the customer of like what constitutes Baremetrics value to them. And maybe they ask for things that we already have, which is great, but that also provides the ability to look into the future and say like, well, here's the direction that we want to move in. So you get the whole list from people. It's never just like an independent piece of feedback. So that was really awesome. On the MRR growth journey, I think that there were a couple of things that I would change. So first of all, I obviously in retrospect now know that during this stage, we're kind of in like false hope. And the reason why we were actualizing MRR gains here is because there's sort of like a spray and pray strategy. And in fact, at the time, I remember going through this and I felt great. Like, hey, like we took a company that was either flat or shrinking, it's now growing, and things are going in the right direction. And I think now I would understand that it was because we weren't operating in a focused way, we were kind of getting these quick gains places, but it was really easy to also like lose that MRR in the next range. So I think that I probably would have wanted to spend longer in the earlier stage, because we kind of did a lot of our learning and a lot of our kind of customer focus. We were trying to talk to customers the entire time, but really in H2 is when we were doing the bulk of our customer communications and really talking to people and really getting involved with them. So I think that if I had to trade in retrospect, I would have rather spent more time in the beginning. I would almost rather flip these. Like, hey, let's be flat for half the year, but really have a clear picture. And like, instead of worrying about growing the business right away, let's really get the insights to get to another level. It was kind of difficult to do at the time because, like I mentioned, we burned $1 million over 2021. So that it's like difficult to have the forethought to be like, okay, we're going to burn money, but what's our goal and where do we want to get to? And, we want to be like $100 million company. We don't want to be, it's not just simply enough to like go from being a $3 million a year company to a $4 or $5 million a year company. So with that focus, I would have, and if I had the choice, if I could wave a magic wand, I would have flipped these two halves. I would have said, let's be flat in H1 of 2021. Let's just spend 6 months just learning and focusing on where we need to go, understanding our customers, understanding our bugs, we did kind of rewrites and tech debt fixes and infrastructure migrations. We did all that through 2021. So we could continue to do that. Maybe we'd even do less of that. In fact, now I think we perhaps went overboard as far as the amount of infrastructure that we needed to update. But maybe that actually would have been appropriate. It's like, hey, first half of the year after an acquisition, let's like fix the holes that we know exist. And then like the rest of the company is like looking to understand who we are, how we fit in with our customers, where we can grow, what are we lacking. And so we're not telling our development team to go and build like random projects and betas to try to like experiment. They're just fixing the holes. And then the rest of the company is focused on talking to customers, getting those insights that we got eventually in the second half of 2021, and then deployed that on a more linear, growth path moving forward from that point. I think that's what I would do differently. So the question reads, a question for your CEO would be, has reversing all of Josh's no-fuss policies really resulted in improving the brand loyalty that existed before private equity took over? This includes making it a chore to try to cancel an account. Everyone can read through the BS about wanting to make sure customers are offboarded properly, LOL. So this kind of has like a categorical like reversing no fuss policies. I'll kind of like just focus in on call to cancel because I think that's like the key reversal of a no fuss policy that people really didn't like. If there are other things that we've done in the past that you want to be addressed specifically, please ask a question. I'm happy to talk about everything. So specifically with call to cancel, I appreciate how annoying it was. And I totally understand, like we added a ton of friction to all of our customers that were canceling during that period of time. And I have to own that. Like, it's just, there's kind of no way around that. This is like, maybe like the worst thing that we can do as far as living up to our principles. So we got a lot of similar feedback to this from our recent survey. And yeah, as of last Friday, we decided that we're no longer going to do call to cancel. We've already rolled it back to a very similar cancellation process that we had before. So yeah, I totally get it. I think that I totally agree. And I think just from a lessons learned perspective, I think that like, despite all the friction, I think that call to cancel was useful to us for a season. I think it's still the fastest way to understand what's going on around churn, what's going on with your customers, understanding like the actual emotions of what's happening. Kind of like to the question that was just asked around like, well, how would you change things? That I would actually probably be doing like more call to cancel calls in that first half, just to like hear what people are saying and hear like why they're frustrated. And we're working on ways to actually build this into the product a little bit better to like, so I think that was kind of the eye opener for me. In business, we tend to think it's all spreadsheets, but it turns out that there's a lot of emotion involved as well. So I think that was really useful into getting to like where we needed to be and really understanding. For us, we're like a key part of people's business operations. So, and this was the case, my last business was a password manager. So it's kind of like we're running businesses where if you're not delivering on the promises that you're making, you're really impacting people's ability to operate and to grow and be a successful business. The call to cancel calls were a great way to do that. But the main reason why we're rolling it back is, one, it doesn't align with our brand and who we want to be and how we want to be viewed by our customers. And two, it's also just like there is a season for it. And now we are really well familiar with why our customers are canceling. We're much more proactive about the conversations that we're having. So it's not really as useful to us anymore. And customers still don't like it. So we've rolled it back and we're not doing that anymore. Moving on. This was from the Google form. Brian, what do you think Baremetrics' greatest assets are to its customers? And how does Baremetrics stand out in a world of increasing dashboards and metrics? Yeah, and so we just did a survey around this. So if anybody's here that answers that survey, I really appreciated everybody taking the time to do that. Yeah, this is like one of the key things that we've gotten out of the past 2 years now, is to really understand like where the world is going from a perspective of dashboards and metrics. Because yeah, it's truly the case that like kind of everything has a dashboard or some aspect of metrics now. And so I don't think that there's any business out there that could survive just strictly as like a dashboarding tool. There probably are some, maybe Gecko Board is still exists out there and still doing great, but yeah, we learned, and that's what our customers wanted too. So maybe a good way to talk about this is the feedback we got from the most recent survey. Because we were asking questions like these of like, what do you get? Like, what's the value of Baremetrics to you and what do you get out of it? So the first thing is certainly insights. And I feel like I've talked about that a lot, but yeah, people are asking specific questions that are getting to like, okay, it's cool that you give me this data, but then either I have to process it and do this other thing. So can you make that easier for me? Or yeah, you've delivered us this data. If you deliver, like you've delivered us the data, but like, what do we do with it? Like, how do we take action on this? How do we actually get this from like a observed opportunity into production, and operationalized into our business? So that's like certainly one big thing that we're going to continue to focus on. That's the medium is dashboard and metrics, but the benefit of the business is not dashboard and metrics. The second thing is churn reduction. So we currently do that. We have a product for that, but we're always looking for ways to double down on how we can help customers understand their churn, how we can help customers prevent the churn in the first place. And then we have recover. So when someone does leave, if they have a expired card, or if they're leaving for any non-voluntary reason, we want to automate the process of getting that customer back for you. So that's something that's very present for us. Yeah, we want to keep doubling down on that. The third thing is forecasting. So, and this actually kind of comes back to the point that I was making earlier of like, we very frequently have situations where we'll have calls with customers. We will sit down and look at their Baremetrics account with them, and we'll come up with a couple of big opportunities that perhaps they didn't see previously. And what would happen in the past is it would be something like, let's say we look at their customer retention churn and there's like a really strange pattern. Like, for example, what if 90% of their churn happens at month 5? And so we don't know their business, but that'll be a question we'll ask them, like, hey, what's going in month 5? You're losing like most of your customers at that point. And they'll give us whatever answer that they have. Maybe they have a project-based customer base, and then they have like an ongoing customer base. And so we'll work with them, and we might determine that it's appropriate for them to hire an account manager that's reaching out to customers in month 2, 3, and 4 to make sure that they understand the long-term benefits, so on and so forth. When the project's done, the product still has value to you, and here's why you might want to keep it. Historically, that insight might have just hit the floor because once they leave the call, they're like, wait, like, well, we don't know how much money we could pay for somebody, or I don't know if hiring an account manager is going to like take us out of business. This was the problem in my business that I ran previously, is that we had money and we were growing, but I never had a sense of confidence that we could hire people. So I kind of just did everything myself. And then, yeah, I got burnt out, and we like kind of kept growing at the same rate. And eventually I'm like, okay, I need to sell this business because I don't know what to do. So that's kind of like the third big area that we currently provide services around as far as forecasting. And that's a huge area for us to move into. So we're going to be running a beta on, right now Baremetrics has forecasting. We're going to be running a beta for what we're calling Forecasting Plus. So we're going to add more features on top of that. And really the goal long-term there is that right now, Baremetrics sort of, if you imagine 4 quadrants, we exist in just revenue side metrics and just the past. So we're analyzing what's already happened. And then moving forward, what we need to do is to expand that, not just revenue, but also expenses, because that's the 2 relevant things to understand what cash you have available to you. And then not just the past, but also the future. So we really want to dramatically increase the scope of what you're able to see and increase the, a lot of customers use Baremetrics as their method to understand their business and see what's happening. And we also want it to be the way that you actually make progress in the future and also see what you think is going to happen, what actually happens, and then have great plans regardless of what happens from a growth perspective. This was a little bit more of a specific question. We're looking for a way to separate out recurring revenue from new revenue for any subscription revenue related stat, not for the other revenue specifically. We'd also love to see for any subscriptions eligible for renewal in a given timeline, how many of those subscriptions could renew and how many actually did renew. So this was actually a clarification. I had to ask a question because this was a pretty specific product question. And this is like a very big area for us to focus on. It's very similar to what I was mentioning previously about forecasting. This is kind of like a lot of the things that our customers are looking for of like, I think it's a little bit of a trap just to measure your company strictly from a perspective of monthly recurring revenue. And maybe we're a little bit responsible for that because that's the first thing you see when you log into your Baremetrics account. But looking at revenue as well is really important. And we see people, we've worked with customers where they're using MRR as a way to determine cash flow. And that's not how MRR works. If you have quarterly or annual payments, if your customers don't pay on time, then your MRR doesn't actually represent how much cash is coming in the door. And so that makes it really complicated when you're trying to also see like, how are we growing from an overall perspective, which is what MRR is the perfect stat for, to really understand sort of like what the scorecard is for your business. But then also see like, okay, well, how can we deploy, what cash can we deploy within our company? So yeah, this is a big area for us to focus on. And I love the other thing that we're really focused on too, is being able to do that look back. So we want to make it better. Like, so a forecast is basically like a set of goals that you set for your business. Like here's like, I think where we're going to go. And then also like looking back retroactively and say, well, once we, let's say we're going to forecast November, when we get into December, we want to be able to look back at November and see how accurate we were. That's called a forecast versus actual in the finance world. And that's something that we're really interested in rolling out because we wanted to be able to do the same thing of like, how much revenue were you expecting to get from current customers? How much revenue were you expecting to grow new? How much churn were you expecting? What expenses were you expecting? And then when we roll over the month, then we want to be able to look back and say, okay, this is just kind of like our operational financial scorecard. How did we do? Did we spend more in an area than we wanted to? Did we grow revenue more quickly? Did we have a lot of customers not renew? This is a big area that we want to focus on because there's a lot of insights there that are critical, even surprising ones. Like we've worked with customers. So we currently have the platform called FlightPath that can do all of this today. And so we'll work with customers and they're like, oh, like we spent less money than we thought we were going to. And they're like celebrating. They're like, okay, great. Like, well, where did you have that savings? It's like, oh, well, we just didn't spend as much as we thought we were going to in marketing. And then we go, oh, maybe that's fine. Maybe the marketing team was extra efficient that particular month. But that might also mean that you're not going to be able to hit your growth goals in the future because you're underfunding marketing or sales or whatever kind of top of funnel activities, middle of funnel, bottom of funnel activities that you have today. So this is a big area that we want to grow in. The customer in the previous email mentioned that this is something that they've asked for a lot and they haven't seen anything on it yet. So I have to apologize for that, but this is something that we definitely are moving towards, and something that's really important for us over the long term. Time for live questions. I don't know if we have any questions.
We do.
Okay.
We do.
Awesome.
We have some. Okay. I'll start with this one's from David. He says, I'm now a reluctant ChartMogul user, boo, because you guys don't support ChartGPT's V2 product catalog. Is this on the roadmap? By the way, I much prefer your UI UX to theirs. In my opinion, the design of your app is exceptional compared with your competition.
Awesome. Well, there's a little bit of a roller coaster of a question, because I talked about being a competitor, working with a competitor, but then you said so many nice things about us. I think I'll have to take it. When we're thinking about zooming out of like Baremetrics, we think about the growth of the product in two different dimensions. So kind of the immediate next round of improvements that we're looking to make are on the vertical axis, which is like kind of like handling more of like the SaaS finance stack. So that's where like forecasting comes in. If you think of like where we were before, it's like from like new customers through your revenue metrics and those sorts of things. We kind of exist up here. What can we do to get on either side of that to be more kind of full featured and full stack for our customers? And that's where adding in, picking up expenses. So we have all of our revenue, picking up our expenses as well, and then bring that all the way through to cash flow. Now it's like we're just like a more verticalized service for you, that we're able to solve more problems and give you more visibility into like what's going on with your business. And everything kind of plays nicely together of like being able to kind of forecast into the future and understanding, setting goals, and then seeing how MRR trends and LTV trends and ARPA trends affect your cash flow. And it just gives you more data that can play with each other, and it gives you more insights to be that dashboard to grow your business. Something else that we might do, something we've talked about, we haven't done any work with yet, but I'll kind of throw it out here since everybody's nice enough to show up, is like, well, what if we went kind of also vertically as well? Of like, right now you only see customers really when they start a trial. We kind of give you a little bit of information, but where Baremetrics really hits its stride is when they become customers and really monitoring what's going on there. It's like, well, what if we could go more vertically as well, of like, what if you could see like visitors within Baremetrics? What if we could visualize your entire marketing funnel into Baremetrics, so you could see charts like you have with MRR and these other areas? What if we could also show information on visitors? Because that's something we have to do internally. We track our funnel, and so we use Baremetrics for almost everything except for visitors and leads and those sort of top of funnel things that we need to go to Google Analytics for. So that's kind of one axis we're looking to grow on. The other axis is growing horizontally, and really for that, it's just like taking that same stack and then getting it into as many places as possible. So ChargeBee product catalog 2 is very high up on our list. Maybe as far as that goes, as high up as any other integration. We have we're in a couple of like very early conversations with some other payment providers, but that's kind of the strategy. And so what we've decided to do is to kind of verticalized first before we go horizontal. But we do want to, once we kind of have this great horizontal or vertical stack that can solve any SaaS metric finance problem that you ever have, we want to get that to as many payment providers as possible. Because right now the solution that we have to offer is like, well, you can do like an API integration with us. And anybody can do an API integration to like deliver more data or to further enrich customers. But we understand it's kind of not practical to say like, hey, if you want to use our product, you need to set up a development project on your team. So I guess that wasn't a timeline, and it wasn't discrete, but it is definitely on our radar. And I imagine that in H1 of 2023, we'll have a clear timeline of like when product catalog 2 will be up and running.
Okay, sticking on the ChartMogul theme, James wants to know, will Baremetrics help me do a price increase as well? Was ChartMogul's higher price a part of the decision?
Yeah, yes, and yes. So let's start with the second question first. So yeah, it was certainly as we were looking around at as our competitors, when we were kind of in that H1 of of 2021 going into H2 of 2021, we sort of had the situation of like looking around like, okay, like actually even right when we bought the company, we were like just during due diligence, we were like looking around and be like, what is the landscape? We're like, okay, we have this Baremetrics product, which is kind of flat from a growth perspective, slightly cash flow negative. Let's look around at our other competitors and like see how they're doing. It's like, oh, well, they are sometimes 3 times the cost, sometimes 4 times the cost. We have a competitor that's free, but has more expensive paid add-ons. And so that was certainly like just to understand, like from a market perspective, like, well, what is a tool like this worth? What value do we have? And then like, what are kind of some of like the external benchmarks before we even start talking to our customers, before we start doing the, analysis of like, what could this be worth? Like if we were actually delivering the full value of the product to everybody, like what would the full value be? And then obviously the value of looking at competitors is like, they have a similar like, cost structure of like, we're doing we have like a data analysis pipeline and that sort of stuff. So there is kind of like a lower bound of what we can afford to charge. So yeah, that was definitely part of it, to look at a competitor, be like, oh, they do basically the same thing. They support product catalog too, but we have a better UI, which we just heard a second ago. So there's some areas where they're better, some areas where we're better, but it's really like neck and neck. But they're charging 3 to 4 times more than us. So that was kind of like, okay, I think that, and they're able to outperform us. They're able to outcompete us because they are able to invest in areas that matter. So that was definitely a big part of like what got our thinking initially of like what the opportunity was there from a pricing perspective. On the second part, yeah, like that's kind of like on pricing, like will Baremetrics help you do a price increase? It's like, yeah, 100%. And that's kind of been like half of the, I don't know, maybe not half, but a lot of the conversations that we've had. So some people are like, hey, like, I really don't like that you've done a price increase, or whatever the case is. We're having a question about their business. Other people, and usually like slightly more quietly, I'm not quite sure why price changes are something that people like to think like are clandestine, but they're like, hey, like, can you help me do the same thing? And the answer is like, yes. So first of all, we just have a lot of experience, both with our company, the companies that we've helped, the companies that we've run in the past. We're a part of a portfolio of SaaS businesses that are all looking to grow. So we just have a lot of experience with it. And then once we kind of get sort of the framework in place, we used Baremetrics extensively to measure the effect of like specific tests that we were doing. Because we tested the price increase for about, I think it was about 9 months of price testing before we actually decided on what we went with and before we deployed it live. So helping you sort of organize what that experiment should look like, and then walking you through the process. I think half of it's just like scary, right? Like you don't know what the outcome's going to be, and there needs to be a step of like kind of you have to try it and put it out there and see what happens. And then even once you think you have all the experience or all the information that you need to then kind of say like, okay, yeah, like we're moving forward with this. So yeah, we love to talk to our customers for any sort of questions that they have, everything from like, I'm not sure what to do, all the way through to like specific questions of like, hey, like, how should we implement a price increase? And there's a lot of like, you don't have to do a like across the board, everybody gets increased to new tiers. A lot of times we find that like, or for example, one of the things that we noticed, like if I'm working with a customer, one of the first things I'll look at is what their expansion revenue looks like. And some customers of ours have no way for customers to pay them more money. So you can kind of get like a de facto price increase by figuring out like, well, what is the higher tier plan, or what is like the more features, or whatever the case is. Like what are your more engaged customers probably want a little bit more from you and would pay like 10 times more than what the people who just log in once a month are willing to pay you. So happy to kind of talk about a price increase or pricing in general. Happy to kind of help arm you with some different options, and then giving you all of the insights and all the dashboards and metrics and tracking that you might want to have along the way. Love to do that, and happy to do that for any of our customers.
Okay, we've got another question here. We get lots of traffic and lots of signups, but not a lot of them turn into actual paying customers. How do we sort through the noise?
Yeah, Yeah, that's a great question. And that's really frustrating, right? Because once you start doing the math of like, if we could improve our conversion rate by tiny percentages, you start hitting your growth goals. Or you're just a materially different business. And we've actually done a lot of work on this too recently. So and even in my past business, that's something that has always been a challenge. So I would it depends a little bit based off of what type of company you are, but I think the structure of that is to first of all like really like understand like all the steps that are involved in your funnel. So for example, a lot of people will have like, oh, we get like this number of visitors, this number of signups, this number of conversions. Those are kind of like the standard steps. But usually you want to have at least like one step in between, just so you can sort of better monitor people through the process. So in between visitors and signups, you might have leads. So those are people that are kind of raising their hand. They're like, I'm curious about using this product, but I'm not ready to sign up today. So that's like a newsletter or a white paper, which we just published a white paper. So that's something we can share too. Anything that's kind of like a percentage of users that are coming to your site are either like totally a bad fit, or it's like bot traffic, or it's just like totally irrelevant. So the further we get down the funnel, and having more steps helps us understand like, what is that failed step? So once we get to signups, between signups and conversions, you want to sort of look at, we call them PQLs. There's a lot of different phrases for that, like activated state. So in Baremetrics, that's somebody who signs up, creates an account, and then connects to a payment provider. So that's that's for us, is to see like, okay, well, how many people sign up and don't take that next step? And we've been, in order to improve that, we're just looking at each step and figuring out where the fall off is, and then really doing our best to sort of reduce. You mentioned, reducing the noise. That's something that you want to do, as far as like looking at those signups and figuring out like, okay, well, how many of these are spam? That's always been like a huge eye opener for me, of like the number of SaaS company signups that are just bot traffic. And it's not really clear to me what exactly they're looking to try. I've heard like they're, signing up for sites to, test credit cards and things like that. But we have like bot traffic to Baremetrics, or we had until we just got rid of the last wave, that are getting like very far into the process of signing up and answering onboarding questions and doing those sorts of things. So that's where I would look to measure, what does the funnel look like? Where are the drop-offs? Thinking about ways to reduce spam. So that might be something like, depending on how much spam you're getting, that might be something aggressive, like putting a CAPTCHA in place, or even like CAPTCHA has like a soft version of like where it's kind of measuring in the background. So instead of forcing everybody to go through it, it's just kind of introducing the spammiest versions, or the spammiest looking traffic that gets rejected. We just started blocking Gmail addresses from signing up, both by typing in their email address and also through when they sign up with Google. And that's not because everyone who signs up with a Gmail address is spam, but basically everybody who's spam uses a Gmail address. So any of these activities that you engage in, you're probably going to filter out some percentage of people that could be valuable customers. But that also gets down to like, you use the right word as far as like noise. So getting down to removing the noise, and then you just see, okay, where are people stopping? We noticed that a lot of people were stopping at the stage where they go to connect their payment provider. So this is kind of specific to our business. I'm happy to jump on a call and talk about this with anybody. But so that got us down the road of like, instead of like, how do we get more signups? It was like, okay, how do we get more people, or actually not even how do we, why is it that people, when they sign up, only like whatever, it's like 25% of them are connecting to a payment provider? And then we can create our list. It's like, well, maybe they don't have the privileges on their payment provider to connect, or maybe they need to see more before they give us all their information, or maybe it's just like the wrong product for them, or maybe they're a bot or something like that. So now we have like 4 things that we can go through and test and say, okay, which one do we think is most likely? This gets into like an experimental framework. Let's just ask everybody, like, ask the question explicitly. Hey, do you not have the permission to do this? Then here's like the email to send, or like, we will help you, whatever the case is. Just anything we can do to get somebody to click a button to indicate that that's the problem. and help them through it, which will immediately increase our conversion rate, but also help us understand long-term why that is. So those are kind of some ideas there. But again, for anybody, if it kind of depends on your business too. So we're happy. This is the stuff. These are our favorite conversations to have. So if anybody wants to walk through these sorts of problems with us, we're happy to work on it with you and help you figure out what's going on.
Awesome. Next question. What is the future of open startups?
Yeah, man, that's such a good question. I think we like it. So open startups is, just to be totally transparent, when I started, it was something that was kind of scary to me. I think maybe for obvious reasons, but like, doing something like when we're doing the price increase or we do something, you're really putting all the information out there into the world, and you get kind of judged immediately. And a lot of times there's like, it's a long game. So like, again, going back to like the growth example of our business in H1 of 2021, people may have been like, oh, wow, Brian is a genius. Like, look at this. He's growing the company so fast. Like, look, they're like flat or they're shrinking for a really long time. Brian shows up, everything explodes. Like, he's incredible. And then like anybody looking in like H2 of 2021, it's like, we got to fire Brian. Like, Brian is not doing not making the right moves, not making things happen. And so we've gone back and forth on it a lot. And in fact, it's kind of a similar situation of like having a call like this. And what I've come to is that it is more valuable, despite, you understand that you're going to take more scrutiny and you're going to have to, like, you're putting yourself out more, you're literally making yourself more vulnerable. It is worth it for me, and I think for all the other open startup companies, to introduce that vulnerability on themselves if it's helpful to somebody else. It's specifically relevant for us. Like, that's our purpose as a business. Like, we're here to help our customers achieve their purpose. Like, we want our customers to get where they're looking to go. So it's worth it to us. And I think I've kind of come to appreciate it. And it's been another thing that we just haven't invested enough time into. I've kind of talked about all the other things that were kind of keeping us busy running around to build like kind of like the future of the business and putting out fires and fixing tech debt and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, I think that there's definitely, I don't know, I guess one of the reasons why I hesitate is like, we don't have any definitive plans to like triple down on open startups, but I think that's more of a function of us just we haven't gotten to that stage yet of like saying like, okay, well, what's the future of this program and what are we going to do with it? It's certainly not going anywhere. And my instinct is that like sometime next year, like probably early 2023, we'll probably have some modifications and improvements to open startups. We don't want it to go anywhere. We've had a lot of internal conversations about open startups. It's just never been on the top of the list. But we do have some ideas of like how to also make open startups a little bit more inclusive. Not everybody wants to share everything like we do. So these are kind of some considerations for us to have moving forward. But in summary, I was afraid of open startups and now I like it a lot. So that's kind of where we're at right now.
Okay, I think we got time for one, maybe two more, if any more jump into the chat. David wants to know, and it's not me, it's another David. He said, your approach to managing data for freemium apps is a bit poop. Sorry. This feels like a huge opportunity as no one is doing this well at the moment that I can see. Any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I agree with you. And it kind of comes into sort of like the strategy of like, when I was talking about like Baremetrics really hits its stride once you have customers that are paying. So like we're kind of fuzzy around trials and then we have nothing above that. And I think freemium business is like the center of gravity of that business is shifted more up into like, it's above a paying customer. Like really where you want to have that level of visibility is like, what's going on with these free trials? Like, how long on average are people in a free trial? Like, what's the conversion rate over time? like even understanding it's like a lot of the entrepreneurs that I respect the most that engage in freemium businesses, they really look at the freemium model as like, it's just like a hyper extended trial. So it's like, you'll see that like, yeah, like whatever, 60% of people will convert over a 9-month period of time or something like that. Or even just to see like, as you're reaching out to those trial customers, you're always trying to provide value for them that makes it worth it for them to upgrade to a paid plan, and trying to figure out what that is. So having a lot of tooling around that. So we want to do more around that. And we want to like better understand some opportunities. There's a couple of different business models that we want to do a better job of modeling, including people that are doing like usage-based as well. That's another example of like, everybody can kind of handle MRR for contracts, for subscriptions, but like, what if you have a customer that pays you $500 a month in overages? So these are some of the examples of things that we want to specifically expand into and verticalize the stack. We're just not, I agree with the prescription that we are a bit poop on it right now. But it's something that we do want to make improvements on. I think we have a very light, toe in the water around trial insights. And I do think that there's something that is potentially useful there, but I totally agree. And I think it's something, I don't know, it's kind of like, I would like for us to do everything all the time. I think probably Freemium will be further down the road as compared to something like the product catalog 2 that we mentioned before. But getting to the end of the questions here, it makes me feel like we are in a spot where we should be starting to publish some ideas of like where the product is going and what the next steps are, just so that we can have people understand where are we focusing our efforts, and then where are we kind of looking to move after that.
Great. Well, that's all the time we have today. Thanks to everyone for joining us. Thank you, Brian, for the chat. Feel free to follow up if there's emails. We'll be sending the video out of this once we get it all processed via email. And again, any questions, comments, concerns, feel free to reach out, and we would be happy to have those conversations. That's it for now, everyone.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. Bye.